Hey everyone, this is Fahad Haider, and today I'll be talking about policy requirements to enable community led renewable energy projects. I am a renewable energy engineer based here in Sydney, Australia. I've also founded my own organization called Eminate, where we empower developing communities with clean energy, and I'm also an IRENA IAC educator. So, a lot of the content for this session has been taken from the IRENA IAC toolkit. So, this toolkit is developed to spread knowledge and information on climate and energy issues, and it's done via collaboration between IRENA, the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and cooperation with SDG 7 Youth Constituency and UNICEF. All right, moving on. We know for a just transition, community energy is absolutely crucial. This is because new sources of energy, such as decentralized solar, offer affordable ways to serve remote populations who do not have access to electricity, perhaps um, for example, grid expansion is too expensive in those areas. This is where community-owned energy systems create local value, enable economic development, and build public support for renewables. A really nice example could be like a community-owned mini hydro or mini grid, which provides affordable energy for the community, but the community can reinvest the profits in environmental and social projects such as education scholarships and access to drinking water. So moving on, we see three key barriers in the global energy transition, and this is applicable on a community level as well. So the first is enabling infrastructure, second is policy and regulations, and third is skills and institutional capacity. This, unfortunately, in my opinion, could do with a lot more attention globally. However, something else to keep in mind is that from what I've seen, all the policies, the skills, and so on, they all funnel down to implementation. What I mean by that is we want policies that help with implementing or installing more solar. We want to build capacity of technicians, for example, that will help with installing more wind turbines. So it usually funnels down to implementation of renewable energy projects, which is why extra emphasis should be put by policymakers on enabling infrastructure, but also operations and maintenance on existing systems. All right, so moving on, I will be talking about 5 key enablers for policymakers. First is obviously policy and regulation, adapting the right policies and regulations. Second is supply chains, skills, and capacities. Third is finance. Fourth is international collaboration. And finally, infrastructure and system operation. Okay, for policies, there are 4 different types of policies that we need to keep in mind. First is deployment policies that help with deployment of more renewable energy, that help with this installation implementation of renewable energy. Second is integrating policies, which means having policies that help with integrating renewable energy into current systems. This could be via, for example, storage, battery storage systems, or grid modernization in some places, or load shaping, and so on. Third would be enabling policies that are designed to create the appropriate conditions for deployment, integration, and also investment. And lastly, structural change and just transition policies, which are aimed to integrate renewable energy across all systems, but they also prioritize economic resilience, societal justice, and environmental protection. Moving on, next point was supply chains, skills, and capacities, and we need resilient and versatile supply chain and responsible procurement. We also need education and training, reskilling and upskilling, which is absolutely crucial. And finally, we need to empower women and underrepresented groups. Touching on education a bit more, we need to support workforce development and leadership empowerment. And this can be done via formal and non-formal education, vocational training, reskilling and upskilling, and also labor market policies, as well as diversity and inclusion strategies. However, focusing on education, training, capacity building, whatever we want to call it, we've seen that focusing on this builds a very strong foundation from which more energy, more work in renewable energy, community energy follows. So be it coming up with the right policies for an area or more implementation of renewable energy and so on. We've seen that education builds a strong foundation, which is why I'm repeating that it's absolutely crucial. Moving on, the next point was finance. Again, we've had a really nice session on finance before, so I won't spend much time. However, we need increased public and private financing as well as access to low-cost financing in the developing world. This is because developing nations over the years have received a disproportionately small amount of investment. This is why the developing nations themselves, they need to come up with the right policies and practices that will attract more investors in their economies. This can be through more education of their locals, more technical training, but also like more better policies that attract investors. These are really important. And also from the investor side, or developed country or investing countries or even companies from their side, they need to put more trust on the developing nations, and also they need to have their own and correct due diligence to be able to make these projects in developing countries a success. Moving on, the next point was international collaboration. This is also very important, especially I've touched on finance in the last slide, but also like helping highly vulnerable, nations, highly vulnerable to climate change. Helping those nations that, for example, the small island development states, but also technology transfer in terms of some, like here in Australia, we have installed a lot of solar, and Germany, Denmark, they're great in wind, for example. So the knowledge, of solar and wind from these countries could be transferred to the SIDS, for example, and other developing nations too. Right. Moving on. Okay, this topic is really close to my heart, and this would be youth involvement. So climate and energy decision making should be inclusive of the voices of children and young people. And we should also center young people as drivers of change. This is because we have already seen amazing, inspiring projects by the youth in terms of renewable energy deployment, in terms of climate action, and so on. And young people definitely have a powerful role to play in the energy transition, since they're mainly upcoming professionals and there are so many different areas to choose from. This is why they need proper guidance and mentorship. And this is required because by 2050, the renewable energy sector alone is projected to create 40 million jobs globally. And many young people face uncertainty in identifying their role within this landscape. This is why mentorship, guidance, career guidance is very important to empower the next generation and bridge the skills gap. Moving on, the last point was infrastructure and system operation. This is basically more renewable energy implementation, energy efficiency implementation, but also cross-sector infrastructure planning, grid modernization and expansion, and supply-side flexibility and demand-side management. So basically the infrastructure implementation, installation, but also the integration side. But like I mentioned before, from what I've seen, like all sorts of renewable energy work that is done, it's more, it all funnels down to implementation. And this is why technical knowledge is very useful. Doesn't matter where we work in renewable energy, having some basic technical knowledge is very useful, which brings me to my next section. So knowing some basic electrical concepts help anyone engaged in the renewable energy sector, including policymakers, to understand and visual the systems they're making policies on better. Right. So we are going to have a very basic introduction to what a watt is, because we keep hearing XYZ, megawatt, kilowatt system, and so on. So what is this watt? And it's useful to keep in mind the underlying parts. I'll talk about some technical jargon as well, but the underlying parts gives a more high-level understanding, which is useful to keep in mind. All right, so moving on. So when I hold this phone, because I know how heavy 1 kilogram is, I can tell, okay, this is less than 1 kilowatt. Similarly, having an idea of watt and watt hours help us to understand electricity consumption and generation better. Okay, so what is power? Power is the rate of transfer of electrical energy within a circuit. So basically, in an instant, how much power is being consumed or generated by the device, right? So all electrical devices obviously consume power, and the sticker on these devices usually show how much power they consume. Right? For example, this chest freezer consumes 220 watts. And finally, 1 kilowatt is 1,000 watts, and 1 megawatt is 1 million watts. So Energy, next is energy. Energy is derived from power, it's basically the power consumed or produced over a period of time. As you can see from the formula, it's power times time, and the unit is obviously watt hours. And it gives a good calculation of energy usage or production over a period of time. For example, the electricity bills we get, you'll see that it's like usually in kilowatt hour, for example, XYZ cents per kilowatt hour. So that gives an indication, okay, um, if we consume 1 kilowatt hour, it's going to cost us this much. Right. Moving on. So these are some power ratings of devices we have in our houses. They may vary, but it sort of gives an indication. Okay, like an LCD TV doesn't use that much power, but a tumble dryer uses a fair bit. Electric showers use a lot. So it's good to know these things, and we can also check the devices in our own homes, usually the sticker, and see how much power they consume. As for generation, let's say we have a 500-watt solar panel. If it's generating with full power, the production will be 500 watts, obviously. And if we have two, it goes to 500 times 2, 1 kilowatt, and then three would be 1500 watts. And we follow the same procedure to go on to kilowatts and megawatts and even gigawatts now on. But another thing to keep in mind would be, like, let's say if you use the tumble dryer at home, we will need 5 of these solar panels generating with full power to just turn on and get this tumble dryer running, which also helps us visualize that, okay, the tumble dryer is quite power hungry, and we will need a fair amount of solar panels to run it. So maybe it's better to come up with an alternative, use a lower power tumble dryer if available, or use other things. For example, we hang our clothes outside, right? So it sort of gives us an indication that, okay, maybe some devices are really power hungry and we should be cautious in using them. Anyway, so that was my session. I hope you found it useful. If you have any questions, please email me at fahad.haider@hotmail.com. And here's the QR code for my organization. Thank you so much. Bye.